Angela Merkel mentioned this morning, I guess there's going to be a summit on Wednesday, I believe in Brussels, because now as a result of this, I mean, we've got, what do we have, 11 million
refugees at this point, displaced people.
Yeah, displaced people in Syria alone. Now these people are moving up through these countries within the European Union, and some people have said this, and I asked you about it. I mean, this does, in fact, and this, I don't think it's hyperbole, this has the potential to be the undoing of the European Union, because if you've got all of these masses of people going into these countries, then you've got a country like Saudi Arabia offering to give money. You know, we're not going to take anybody, but hey, guess what? We'll build some mosques where you can foment more hate on somebody else's territory. I mean, this is not a good situation.
There's a lot of issues that you're pointing to that are very important that are not being discussed by the media generally. Exception of this show. One, there's this obvious element of multicultural instability in Europe that it's been facing. Europe has failed to integrate its immigrants. It's taken on very big waves of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East, and there is a very big problem now of having failed to integrate people even born there to second generation foreigners who are now, for example, British or French, right? It's a very tenuous situation. They're trying to wrap their head around it, but there's all these kind of political correctness rules around it. They're going about it in a clumsy way. Mm-hmm. That's number one, okay? Number two is when you have this large an influx of people at one time, you end up having different groups in the countries. It took Europe centuries and centuries of war to come to the conclusion that good fences make good neighbors, and countries that were more or less culturally homogenous and had borders between them were more stable in the long term than countries that had multiple groups. For example, Syria, for example, Iraq, right? Humans are tribal by nature and they tend to fight each other. Like even Canada has a group of French people and English, and they've been fighting peacefully, but for the most part peacefully, about separation. That's another thing. I think the most alarming about this is that Europe has opened its arms to refugees now, which is a laudable thing. And we should always be sensitive to people who are fleeing for their lives. I mean, I'm the son of refugees myself from the Middle East, okay? I'm not insensitive to it. On the other hand, there's a complete absence of looking at the cause here. The cause is the war in Syria. The war in Syria is about to be made worse, for Sunnis at least, by Western policy of giving money to Iran and empowering Russia now in Syria. And yet, the Western world is about to take all these people, and it's broke. The European Union is broke. It can hardly deal with Greece. It's going to take on people who don't yet have jobs, who don't speak the language, like millions of people. This is a big strain. And what it's doing is coddling the Arab world. The West has taken the habit of taking upon itself all the problems of the Arab world and never holding the Arab world really to account as much as it should be. So I'll give you one example. 1948, the State of Israel was created. The Arab nations attacked Israel. There was a long, dirty battle, and there were a lot of refugees on both sides created. The Jewish refugees went to Israel and they were absorbed. Some money from US Jews, there was a bit of help, and they were absorbed and became citizens. The Palestinian refugees, more or less the same number, were put in camps in the Arab world. Mm-hmm. And instead of being integrated in those countries, the Arabs kept them in the camps, the Arab countries kept them in the camps to be some kind of a political irritant, breeding extremism, and the Western world said, you know what, we'll take care of them. And now for 67 years, 3 generations, it's the only people on the planet who are still considered refugees, and you have an agency of the UN, funded by the West, that takes care of these entire cities now in these Arab countries instead of integrating them, okay? That's one example. The other example now is Syria. Why are we not pressuring the Arab world, especially if Obama wants to get out of the Middle East, to take care of its own refugees? This is an Arab-on-Arab war. Why is the West expected to, how is it going to solve the problem? How are we ever going to have accountable governments in the Middle East if we shield those governments from accountability? Humans learn by paying for their mistakes. It's that sad, but in the West, in the East, in every culture, we've only progressed once we've made mistakes and had to pay for them. Mm-hmm. If you don't have to pay for your mistakes, they're not really mistakes.